I move to move the bill, and just this particular bill comes on the back of the incredibly long negotiations that it took for government formation at the start of this year. So in the context of this is that there were over 140 days of negotiation for government. That's a shocking length of time, and it dwarfs the last negotiation period by about 70 days. Many people outside of the political bubble were shocked. Many people looked to their own lives, saw that the crisis that was happening in terms of COVID-19, looked to their own lives, saw how people were knuckling down and getting on with life, making decisions within their community organisations, within their businesses, etc. And they saw the political bubble in Leinster House, and they saw that move in a phenomenally slow and sluggish fashion. People were horrified by this. And the truth of the matter is that 140 days is a democratic deficit. It's a democratic crisis. You had a situation where you had a Taoiseach with no mandate. You had a cabinet where many of the ministers were unelected. You had a newly elected TDs unable to scrutinise those ministers. And you had a Dáil that was unable to legislate. So there was a significant crisis happening within the political system here in Ireland at a time where we needed to be able to function properly to deal with the crisis that was on hand. And I don't think that people actually in the political class realise the difficulty that poses, and it poses those difficulties across a number of different levels. The first level is a democratic level. You know, the whole idea that a minister making decisions in a country would have a democratic mandate to give them the right to make those decisions, and that you would have a cabinet, a collective cabinet, with their roots in the political will of the people of Ireland making those decisions. We had a Taoiseach that was designing a plan of action for the lockdown period, who left the cabinet with unelected ministers, drove past the Dáil, went to RTE Studios and literally launched his plans there. And the democratic process was ignored. It was wrong and it shouldn't happen. And we had ministers such as Regina Doherty, Shane Ross and Catherine Zappone, who were making decisions worth billions of euros, and yet they had no mandate. There was also a cost to the Exchequer as well. So these ministers, it was estimated, were costing the Exchequer about €40,000 extra on an annual basis. And many of them had their pensions increased because their terms as ministers were extended. And we heard a lot of energy from the floor of the Dáil here today about ministerial pensions, etc., while many of these ministers had their pension timescales increased radically and jumped into different pension brackets as a result of that. Now, it is in the gift of the Taoiseach of the day to actually take the junior ministers who were in place without a mandate and replace them. And it is also in the gift of the Dáil of the day to be able to select successors to those ministers. I understand that after a general election where there is a period where government formation is happening, that it's very, very difficult to replace ministers in a short period of time. And this particular bill that I've launched over the last number of weeks allows for 6 weeks for the existing ministers who had mandates in the previous Dáil to remain in place, to be able to make the necessary decisions to keep the country moving and afloat. But there has to come a time, there has to be a red line, a period of time whereby the Dáil says to itself that we have the democratic mandate amongst the existing TDs, and there is a skills and ability amongst the existing TDs, and that the ministers should be replaced with the existing TDs. And this bill is a very simple bill. It simply puts the onus on the Dáil after 6 weeks since the election that new ministers of state are selected and put into place, and then any minister without a mandate no longer has a right to remain on as a minister, and that new ministers are selected. So Bhualam just Bhí gear céim uafásach sa tír seo ag tús na bliana, bhí gear céim mar gheall ar Covid agus a riile, ach bhí gear céim déanlachach freisin. Bhí golóir airí gan údarrás ag déanamh golóir cinnintí uafásach tábhacht sa tír seo. Bhí siad a caithfh golóir airgid, na billiún euro airgid, ach fós ní raibh údarrás ó na tóthirí sa tír seo. De bharr an bille seo, as seo amach, Bair an rialtas, Bair an dál, airí nua a chur san áit, sé seachtain tar éis an tábhacháin agus i mo thuairim bheadh sí i bhfad níos sásúil agus i bhfad níos déanlá. Gur míle mágad hain.